Traveling to Numbani.
Oh no, you're taking damage. Razor.
Okay, so hi everybody. Let's start off with who is Mercy? What kind of character is she? She is a main/primary healer. You can call her either or. And that's because of the healing output she does. Her healing is 60 per second, while Zen's orb, in comparison to an off heal, is 30 per second. So that's the difference. Is her healing is consistent and there is more of it. So 60. Why would you play her? Because of her healing. It keeps your team alive, keeping the school trip going, right? And she would be good against any team really currently with the meta going, especially with shields. So as a healer, you would probably want her on your team. And in terms of why would you play her, I would say if you like moving around a lot, if you like having the mobility and being able to keep your team up and seeing your team, if your focus is your team and you have fun with that, I would say she's the pick for you. So the first things we're going to go through all the different aspects of Mercy, starting with the healing beam. So the healing beam is automatically your left click and it's the yellow line between you and your target. So this goes for 15 meters, but there is a 2-second grace period with this, so I go a little bit further, and then it breaks off, and I can't heal her. But if I come closer to the 15 meters, then it comes back on. And I think I'm gonna let Evie take the rest from that.
Yep, so like Sub said, there's a bit of a 2-second grace period. Now, this isn't just for distance, it is as well as for line of sight. So you can keep corner peeking and healing somebody for free for over 2 seconds. So what this allows you to do is stay in cover a lot more often, and that aids you in your positioning, giving for a lot more options in safer positioning to give yourself more value over time instead of being dead, which is at least 20 seconds out of the engagement and useless to your team. With that being said, both damage beam and healing beam are both 15 meters. There are settings in Mercy's controls that are here specific to her regarding those settings, such as how accurate you have to be to aim at them, as well as your preferred beam target. We'll go over a little bit more of those later. But with healing beam, it is the most consistent high rate of healing in the game besides Zenyatta's ultimate overall. This is why it gives Mercy a unique characteristic, that is she is a very high value healer over time. But with that also tying into her unique characteristics compared to the other healers, as well as why you would pick her. So, such as if this Winston placed bubble, most of the healers in the game cannot heal through Winston bubble. However, Mercy and Zenyatta can. Zenyatta's ultimate can't heal through bubble. Lucio can't heal or ult through bubble. Ana can't heal through bubble, and Moira in a recent patch will not be able to heal through bubble besides orb and coalescence. So it gives you kind of an idea of who can be healed in what situation. Brigida's AoE cannot heal through bubble, and nor can her ultimate, but her E can. So generally speaking, if it can target somebody through bubble, it very likely is probably what can be healing through bubble. So depending on the meta, it gives you an easy idea of who you should probably be picking in that meta to give more value to your team. With Mercy going through so many different issues that the current meta provides, that's why this meta is very favorable for Mercy in general. Now, Damage Beam, it does an additional 30% damage for the person applying it that you're boosting at the time the damage is applied. Now, that goes for if someone Dragon Strikes, say a grab, you need to be damage boosting the person over the duration of the grab, but you don't need to damage boost, say, the initial arrow from the Hanzo ultimate. It's only as the damage is being applied. So say if a soldier shot a helix rocket, you could hear he shoots it and then go and damage boost him, and then if it's far enough away, you might be able to damage boost him in time before the rocket hits to secure a kill, such as a one shot on a tracer.
We can showcase some of the
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to do so now.
Well, first, we wanted to have a Winston. So we have our Winstons here. So for me, I'm going to have you attack Allie, Trip, and then Consta, can you attack Meat Shield when I say go? And Pink Assassin, can you have your heal beam on Meat Shield at all times?
Should we just start attacking, or?
Yeah, well, when I say Pink, yep, okay. Okay, Winston, start attacking right now. So, this is to showcase the idea that Winston does 60 damage per second. Mercy's heal beam is exactly the same amount. So, if you have Winston attacking, like, let's say you're Zen, you can keep him up while he is being attacked. That's something to keep in mind.
Let me get you patched up.
On the other hand, Reinhardt's hammer does 75. So you cannot technically out-heal a Reinhardt hammer. So that's also something to keep in mind when you're healing people and keeping them up, if you can keep it up or not.
I'll add to that say if one of the Reinhardts attacks one of the Winstons, because Winston is an armored target, it'll take much long. Sub, can you heal? Actually, Ryan, can you heal the Winston? So only one of you. Sorry. So if you watch Akira, you can fully swing as long as you want. So the thing here to keep in mind, as long as you are also healing Winston while he has armor, Reinhardt's only doing 70 per second. So while the Winston has armor, that's an additional amount of time that you have for, say, Winston to do damage. So that makes it much more difficult for targets that do low amounts of damage, such as Tracer or another Winston. When Winston does, if Akira stops and Constina does damage to a Winston and Mercy over here. What this does, Ryan. So, stand
right.
next to the monkey, please. Not Akira.
Right.
Rain, stand next to monkey. Your monkey. So if Constina does damage to the monkey and the Mercy, you'll notice how, because he takes half damage from armor, it gives you an idea of how much value it is to keep armor alive, as well as armor targets are lower priority if they're not being dove. So something to keep in mind when prioritizing healer, who you can heal.
Right.
We can
Okay.
switch back to Mercy. Sorry.
Yep, I think we're gonna showcase damage next. So, we already. And just something to keep in mind too with the damage beam, it's the same distance and it's just right click instead of left click. So the same distance, 15 meters.
Enemy contact.
Point salmon.
Guys, you can go with Mercy if you want.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, so
You too, Akira. Everybody can go Mercy now.
all right, we'll wait for them to get back. Trip.
Whee! Yeah, which way am I going?
Hello.
It goes out here. Bye.
Watch your backsides.
Yeah, that's not Mercy.
Well, we're gonna do an example with the damage boost.
Yeah. So, if I stand back here, for example, and Sub, you come over here. So notice how Sub doesn't need to damage boost me for now. And if I Helix Rocket, Trip, she lives the damage. But I can Helix Rocket, and before it lands,
Feeling
Sub can
spry.
then damage boost me to secure the kill. So it doesn't need to be the instant the damage is shot, but the instant the damage is applied, and getting an idea for what damage amounts are there and at what ranges gives you a better idea of when to damage boost. And because it's instant, you should be damage boosting very, very often. Depending on the situation, you should very likely have at least 80% worth of offensive assists as you do defensive assists.
Enemy seen.
So, keeping that in mind, it not only is very helpful to secure kills for your teammates, but as well as you gain ult charge by damage amplifying. Now, as you start to think about what damage is being applied, as well as trying to secure more kills, you will also, at the same time, gain a lot more ult charge. Because effectively, what it is that as your teammates do their jobs doing damage, that'll allow you to effectively mooch off of them doing their jobs to assist you in getting your ultimate so you can do your job more often. Now, there's a lot to damage boost, there's a lot to talk about, but we're going to save some of that for the ranty parts after the session. Just keep in mind, the more you know about damages in the game and ranges and who's shooting who will give you a better understanding of when to use healing or damage.
Alright, so the next thing we're going to go off to is another ability called Guardian Angel, which is standard-wise, it's your shift. So you have your target in your reticle, and you shift towards them. It's the primary mobility for Mercy. It is 30 meters in range, so it's twice as long as the beam. And I'm gonna let Evie discuss the rest.
Yeah, so Guardian Angel has a lot of interesting characteristics. Probably the most interesting characteristics ability in the game once you look at all the details, but I'm sure somebody will contest me on that. The amount of different things you can do with Guardian Angel while holding your jump key is very, very immense. Words, by the way. So if I Guardian Angel and immediately hold space, because Sub is at a higher altitude than me, you can get a giant boost up into the air. The better you are at timing and the more ideal the distance from the ground Sub is, the higher up you can go and or further. So really this ability is all about timing and distance. Now, even if somebody is just standing there on the ground, specifically tanks because they're taller characters, because their reticles are higher up on their bodies, they compared to say Torbjorn, they're kind of in a way above the ground. Now, any character can jump and you can boost off of them as well. Now, say all of you can come over here to this side of the payload. I want everybody to try and get up on this side.
Think of in terms of the space bar, I think of jumping off my face and using me as like a jumping board. So that's the timing. So once you get like close enough to me, you should push space.
Basically, it's right as soon as you're about to... Okay, so all of you should know when you're Guardian Angel into a target, you slow down as you reach the target. Basically, you want a spacebar before you have that slowdown.
Mm-hmm. And to get that high ground, you want to get relatively close to the target, but not like right on it, and time it to get that extra boost up.
Nice.
Now, once you've gotten up here, can you please stay up here so we can figure out who needs assistance?
Oh yeah, you have to be super close.
Yeah,
No, you don't need to be super close. It's all about angle. In this specific example, being close helps, but in general, it's about timing. Okay. I'm not sure if it'll help you, but just watch how I do it.
Right beside you.
Or don't. Does that timing might help you at all?
I'll try.
You want to be a little bit closer. Your distance is a little too far. A little right. Right
Try standing around there. Okay, if the hitbox isn't gigantic.
Let's see.
Oh, you got it. Nice shot.
There it is. Nice.
Greetings. Hello.
Okay, so next we're gonna talk about Res. The ability known with E is your E button. It has a 30-second cooldown, and that is a cooldown, so you can't, once you die, it doesn't regen. It's your speed is slowed down while you're rezzing. You go 1.35 meters per second, so you move a lot slower, but there is some movement. The casting time takes 1.75 seconds while you are vulnerable at that time. And if you move too far away from what you're casting, so it's a 5-meter radius. If you move too far away, it is canceled. So that's something to watch out for, and it's very common with bulking because you move a little bit faster while bulking. I'm gonna let Evie take the rest.
What's that distance? Can I just see an example of the 5-meter distance really quick?
I'll show you an example if you all come over here.
Affirmative. Hello there.
Okay, so what I'm gonna have you all do is have Sub come right here.
Mhm.
Kill Sub. Okay, so now watch this.
This is not your
You
time.
can be on the ground and get the res
This
off
is a role
in certain
reversal.
locations on the map. Sometimes you don't need to hover and glide downward to get a res off in cover. So depending on the map, you should learn the different spots where you do not need to glide. It sometimes jukes people more than them knowing that you're probably just going to be hovering and cover and getting off a res. So there's a lot of different things you can do with that and learn from it. I'll do another one right here. So an added effect. So if sub comes right here and gets killed, run backup sub. Okay. So watch this. So notice how with that, and then you can also then boost right back up based off of where she died from cover. So this very often will happen where your team is holding this side of the map, and then the attacking team comes over here, and while your team is backing off of high ground, your team ends up, one person gets left behind, gets picked from the edge. So it's really good to use this spot to fall down and res and cover, for example. So there's a lot of different things you can learn about Resurrect. There's a lot of different tricks, and a lot of them combine with other abilities of Mercy's. So say, for example, it's another super basic one, but not enough people do this. So say if someone dies right here.
Kill me.
Instantly going and... I didn't do that fast enough. But yeah, getting behind cover on payload, you can pretty much get behind any payload while rezzing anyone on the payload. I see a lot of Mercies like, oh, I gotta res somebody on the payload, and then they just stand there. It's like, you can get cover while you're doing it. There's a lot of different things you can do with Resurrect, and most of them are basic once you get them down. With that being said, what I often like to do, if I can get a background sub. Okay, can someone come stand next to sub and then kill her?
Oh.
Yeah, well, half messed that up.
Let's get you back in the fight.
Can you stand directly next to her, please?
This is a role reversal.
Up. Okay, so something you can do
Quite famous.
is, if I don't mess this up, I did this earlier perfectly fine.
Yeah, you did.
Enemy seen.
Oh, my living word. Stardust, can you stand right there? I'm sorry.
Here?
On the lower part. Okay, so a lot of the time what I'll do when I get off a res in a tight situation is stand on top of the target that's likely enough to kill me. And so by the time I'm getting res almost completely done, they'll then realize that I'm on top of them. In tight brawl comp situations, it is very likely that this will work unless they, say, have a Reaper and turn around fast enough. So you can get some cheeky reses off by doing this method, and oftentimes I'll do this and get my Rhine alive and then he'll Earth Shatter, for example. Being creative is really what helps you learn as Mercy. And in this situation, it is very likely that most people just need to gain more experience after learning a few tricks, and then they'll apply it to other areas in their experience and grow from there. That's most of the parts of Mercy's kit, but in this case it applies the most. I'm just personally sad, side note, of how many people are saying res is literally useless and that it's a suicide ability. No, they're just doing it wrong. So with that being said, next ability.
We're gonna go to the alt next. So, Valkyrie, basically what it does is it enhances some of Mercy's most important attributes, including her distance with Guardian Angel, and also your beams. So your beams, the distance on them gets twice as much. Here, let me show.
Heroes never die.
So it's extended,
You needed a doctor?
and then you get that 2 seconds still of grace period, and also speed of movement. So I can move from here. I can still see you guys and glide to you from across the map. And then also her beams go to all teammates that are clumped up within a certain radius. So you can damage boost and heal while valking as well. And it has a 15-second duration. And I'm gonna let Evie talk about the rest.
Yeah, so one more, slightly more specific example for the distance. If someone can stand on this potted plant over here. Thank you. So I'm going to back up all the way,
Never die.
and you can actually tell the distance here. So right here is the Guardian Angel distance in Valkyrie.
Ich bin da.
So you can get a decent idea that, generally speaking, you can cover almost any map. And glide across them with 2 guardian angels.
I'm with you.
Like maps with good vision, like let's say ruins, you can come almost from spawn and get to the point really quickly.
Enemy seen.
Other maps that are indoors, not so much. Even village in Nepal, because your team tend to be inside the point. If they're in the point, you won't be able to get that boost off of it. And I think we can let the girls try Valking and seeing the distance for themselves. Does that sound good, Evie?
Yep, have at it.
Helden sterben nicht. Heroes never die. Helden sterben nicht. Helden sterben
Gauging this
nicht.
distance is
Heroes
actually more
never die.
important than a lot of people realize. For some examples, I have personally valked as soon as I'm in range of a target, just to heal them,
Heroes
when I
never
would have
die.
otherwise not made it in time from a guardian angel, or even guardian angel and beaming. So it's really important to gauge this distance and understand it, because you will likely save a lot of people's lives over the course of it.
Enemy seen.
So going from there,
Heroes
pretty much
never
every
die.
part of Mercy's kit is enhanced during Valkyrie, except for Resurrect. Mercy's pistol is infinite ammo and double the projectile speed. Beams are double the distance and chain from the target that you are attached to. Her passive movement speed with flight is very fast. It should be compared to 6-meter passive movement speed for all characters in Overwatch, and Valkyrie is 10 for meters per second. Then you also have her passive regenerating health ability, Angelic Descent, which is the same name for her Angelic Descent of falling down slowly, which engages the auto regeneration permanently of 20 healing per second, which is the same amount of healing per second as shields regenerating, but permanently. Out of Valkyrie, that is, after 1 second of not receiving damage, she'll heal herself for 20 healing per second, with that being said. Going on from that, it's important to keep in mind why to use Valkyrie. Oftentimes people will utilize it when they don't fully understand the situation. Try not to panic Valkyrie, as it often does not pan out. Use it with intent, and most of the time, for example, that would be if your team is generally full health and you're going in for an attack. Damage boosting your team while calling out a target might help you a ton. Even if 2 or 3 of your teammates that are being damage boosted looks and shoots a target, that's a lot more additional damage
Enemy
on a
seen.
target than otherwise. And then by having that advantage, it'll be much more difficult for a Mercy to get off a Resurrect, because your Valkyrie is likely still going on for another 11 seconds. So, keeping in mind why to use Valkyrie is very important, and it is overall something that you learn over time with game sense, in general with playing Overwatch. Such as, for a couple basic examples, I personally liked Valkyrie when 2 or more people are critical health, but I know that I can save them if both of them were being healed at the same time by me. So that's one of them. Sometimes I Valkyrie when a Winston jumps in on 2 squishies, but I know that those 2 squishies, if given the time, can secure the kill on Winston, and then we can move along. Even though I'm using Valkyrie effectively to only kill a Winston, that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is we saved 2 people that would have otherwise died, say a Zenyatta and a Ana maybe. But then moving on from that, you then have another 10 seconds of your Valkyrie to then help the rest of your team with the advantage. So there's a lot to keep in mind. Again, be creative about it. Learn as much as you can, and you'll get better at utilizing Valkyrie.
I'm just going to quickly restart the match. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Traveling to Numbani.
Did you guys want to cover beam settings a little more in depth?
Yeah, see, we skipped over a lot, so I got to take this opportunity to track back and cover some of the things we skipped over. All right, so what we're going to track back and cover is a little bit more of Mercy's GA boosting, but in a specific way. The key here is that to keep in mind that this isn't just for boosting getting altitude. You should always be using GA boosting. Now, say for example, can you stand up here for a bit, like right here? So look how long it takes me to fly to sub right here. Okay, see how it like slows down and all? Now watch me fly to sub but with a little bit of boost. Like, you get a lot more speed over time to get to your target for free. There's never a time where you shouldn't be using boosting. For example, as I'm boosting, if I boost around here going to sub, it's where the cooldown can already start because I'm gliding to my destination additionally.
Enemy seen.
So it's a lot of free speed that you should otherwise not be skipping out on. So try it out, fly to a target quickly. The better you are at it, not only the better timing and distance and altitude you get, but as well as you'll feel a lot better in using Guardian Angel, something you should be doing very often with it being on a 2-second cooldown. Alright, so all that leads into some important parts of Mercy to keep in mind that everybody when starting off to play Mercy needs to look into. If everybody can press Escape, go to Options, click Controls, go to All Heroes, go down to Mercy. Mercy has the most amount of hero-specific settings in the game, and because of that is, in my opinion, the most affected by her hero-specific settings and your playstyle. Some settings are more likely to be more beneficial for your own playstyle. Depending on how much you understand of the settings, you might still prefer the base default settings if you understand why to pick them. But if you don't know why to pick them, it's very likely that all non-default settings will assist you the most because it's the least confining settings. I will add, however, if you are using your pinky on your shift key to Guardian Angel, you probably don't want hold Guardian Angel because that's going to be painful. But with that being said, if you can rebind Guardian Angel to something you're more comfortable with, I do highly recommend it.
Do we want to go more in depth about beam sensitivity, or do we want to move to something next?
Yes, I was. Yeah. So, something also in these settings to keep in mind is the sensitivity settings for Beam and Guardian Angel. What this basically means is look at a teammate, aim a bit further away from them as much as you can before the reticle disappears. Now, the lower that setting, the more accurate you have to be. In many cases, that is favorable to lock onto a teammate, more specifically if you're having trouble with that. Some people prefer it to be as wide as possible, which doesn't inherently make sense, but whatever floats your boat. But just keep in mind that you have the option available to you if you would be more comfortable with that. Now, the settings in a row, quickly, toggle beam connection is whether or not you click on a person and the beam continues without you holding down left click or right click. For me personally, I initially changed this back when I played Mercy for up to 20 hours straight, so my fingers hurt. And I still, in general, feel like just holding down a button constantly isn't ideal for you. So toggle feels good, but toggle isn't ideal if you use prefer beam target on, because then you'll have to constantly be detaching your beam to fly to a specific target at higher elos of, like, just generally speaking, you'll have to change targets much more quickly. And because of that, you very likely will not want toggle beam. So hold the beam is better in that case. So those settings kind of go hand in hand. But if they're both non-default, they're also very comfortable because it allows you to have the freedom to heal a specific target and never have to detach from them. So you can go where you want and never have to detach from a target, assuming you're in range. And so that allows you a lot more freedom to not have to think about constantly detaching your beam, and is for a lot of people much more comfortable. However, like I said at the start of it, if you know the settings and why you prefer them, you might prefer being able to target people through walls with prefer beam, where you would otherwise not be able to target people and fly to people through wall that you have your beam on because of the 2-second grace period for beam. So some people prefer it if you know why to do so. But if you don't know why and aren't practiced with that, it's effectively playing Mercy on a more difficult level for no reason. I would categorize the default Mercy settings as hard Mercy to learn for realistically no reason to the person who is playing Mercy for casual reasons. So if you want to just learn as much as you can on Mercy and don't care about that one specific trait, you very likely will enjoy non-default Mercy settings a lot more. So as far as Guardian Angel goes, I believe that covers that. So also keep in mind pretty much everything we've stated as far as tips for every single thing about Mercy apply to Valkyrie. So the GA boosting applies to Valkyrie, the beam 2-second rule applies to Valkyrie, and so on and so on. So something to keep in mind as well is that something I didn't mention my first time around for this earlier today is that when you're healing people in Valkyrie and you win a team fight, immediately stop healing people and heal people outside of the next Valkyrie. That allows you to get a lot more ult charge for the next engagement to then be up at least like 15 to 20% depending on who all was damaged. So that'll allow you to generate your ult much quicker for the next engagement rather than healing people in Valkyrie for no reason.
Enemy seen.
So Sub, if you want to take the next topic.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Caduceus Blaster, aka Mercy's gun. It is a projectile. It does 20 HP damage per shot, and it can headshot. One thing to keep in mind is, let's say if you were shooting your gun, you guys can do a couple bullets, and then move to your staff, hold 2 seconds, and then move back to your gun. It is automatically reloaded. So there shouldn't be a reason for you to reload it manually. You shouldn't be pressing the R because in that time you could be healing your teammates. Another thing too is you'll notice that there is no fall damage. So no matter how far away the target is, they'll take the same amount of damage whether they're close or far away. And also it does not drop. So where you shoot is where it will hit the reticle exactly, no matter how far away it is. Evie, your turn.
Yeah, so there's a couple things to keep in mind with the pistol in general. The way I like to think about it is by the time you ever need to reload, that's probably the time you need to reassess your situation, like address your life decisions for pulling out your pistol, and figure out where your team is and who needs help. Because that would be 5 bullets per second, and over the course of 4 seconds, your team was not getting healing from you, at least. So then pull back out your staff. It'll automatically reload. If you feel so inclined to pull it out again later, you don't have to worry about reloading it, and you can resume doing your job as a healer. Now, that's also why I personally believe that Valkyrie's pistol should not have infinite ammo, but potentially increased fire rate instead, because people get so caught up in tunnel visioned using the pistol in Valkyrie and end up wasting a very powerful ability for 15 entire seconds because they feel like they want to be Glock happy, and very likely they can't aim to begin with. So try not to waste your time. Time is very precious as Mercy. Every second you're not doing your job, that is a second that you could have damage boosted somebody to secure a kill, or 60 additional health to somebody. It is very, very important to keep in mind how you are allocating your time as Mercy, which is why it's important to call out for a teammate to fly to if you died from spawn. That could save you an additional 12 seconds. That's basically dying. That you could save by calling simply for help to fly to. This also applies for when... Gathering my thoughts because I'm an idiot. Yeah. Honestly, I've just lost my train of thought. This is a situation where try not to ever pull out your pistol, and when you do, make sure it's a widow. That's about it, frankly.
So going from that, there's a couple things I'd like to mention. In terms of rezzing, one thing to keep in mind is sometimes, and I'm prone to this too, so I think everybody can be, you want to get a res off, but you've lost the fight and you think maybe one will win, but it looks bad. It would probably be better for you to save that res because it is a 30-second cooldown, and also that gives, let's say you want to res a tank for sustain, or maybe they have their ult, that could give ult charge to the enemy that otherwise they couldn't get, and also you add to stagger. So use your res wisely. Look at the situation, get an idea if that fight is lost or not. Another thing too is let's talk about some Mercy counters. If you look online and you look up counters for heroes for Overwatch, Mercy is everybody. Everybody counters Mercy, even Zenyatta. And that's just because of who she is, her kit. She is a healer, she mostly just outputs heals, right? Or damage boosts. You basically support your team. Now, I would say that there are cases where like you have a Winston or a Genji jumping on you that seems more pressing, but it really depends on the team composition. Everybody's out to get you. One thing I will say is if a Winston does jump on you, you do have the mobility to move away and get away from him. But remember your slower other healer, if it's Zenyatta, remember to keep an eye out for him because he won't be able to. And then I'm going to move to sensitivity for Mercy as your hero. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you need to always be able to see your teammates. You need to be able to look around and get a feel for where they are, because they're not only what your targets to heal and damage, they're also your get out card. So in terms of sensitivity, I would say either go to a customs with people in it, or go to quick play and adjust your sensitivity that fits your playstyle and what you and being able to see around you. I know Evie has a couple points as well for that, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, with sensitivity, keeping in mind, I used a insanely high sensitivity for 1.5 years, so I have the experience to know that, from at least my experience, it is not ideal to have 2 sensitivities or multiple sensitivities for different heroes. It is by default not ideal. Some people can pull it off and get away with it, but overall it hinders your ability to easily swap heroes and be ready to play the hero. So try to find a happy balance of a sensitivity that you're still comfortable on other heroes and aiming, but doesn't hinder your camera movement as Mercy to quickly swap to different targets, as well as make sure that you can turn around very quickly for your other healer to ensure that they can stay alive when they get dove on, for example. So, in general, Mercy settings, you need to test them out. It takes some time. Please give each of them some time and the testing they deserve, because some of the settings I didn't get used to for 3 days, but just based off of my assumption, I knew they'd be better, and it ended up being very good for me. So take the time, give yourself basically for future you, spend the time now to invest and practice different settings to figure out what you are most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. What I would like to add too is now we talked about the benefits of having the prefer preferred target on for your Guardian Angel. Now, I personally have mine turned to preference, but this is because there's different payoffs, and we talked about the ones for not having it on. For me, like let's say there's a Diva Bomb, I have been able to avoid a Diva Bomb in like the Well and Ilios because I have this on, because I can lose sight for 2 seconds and come back. It's also the same when you get booped off a map, like let's say they have a Fada, you have a tether, you're able to get back up. So you have to figure out what works for you, and again, give it a couple days, because I did try it without it for a couple days and see what works best. And everybody has different play styles. So whatever works for you, and yeah, that's all I had to add to it.
I mean, as far as this session goes, I personally don't have much more to add. So if you have questions, now would be the time to ask anything about Mercy.
And also the stream too. Feel free to ask. We have mods looking at the questions, and they'll send them to me. So.
Also, if while we're doing the Q&A, you guys want to practice this stuff, like tweak your settings and just kind of check stuff out, fly to each other, like go ahead.
As far as the Guardian Angel sensitivity, do you feel like, especially in higher elo games where it tends to be a lot more in each other's faces at times and stuff, that it's easier for you to get to the specific target that you're looking for? Like when you have someone that's standing on top of your Winston, for example, and they're much lower than, I don't know, your soldier. Do you feel like it's easier to get to that Winston if you lower that, or do you like it, you know, higher? How would you say that that compares?
It's absolutely more ideal the lower it is, to ensure that there's never a situation where you feel like someone was lost because you couldn't select the target. I've personally landed on 90-85 because I spent so much time with 100, but given time, I actually was planning within the next month to reduce it to at least to both 80, if not potentially both 70, to get it lower. Yeah. It's just as the setting when the setting was released, I instantly was comfortable with 90-85 as my middle ground.
Let me see. I'm looking at my sensitivities. I do find it a lot easier. I remember back when there was 100, I had trouble latching onto certain heroes, especially your skinnier ones. I have my settings for Guardian Angel on 57 and my beam sensitivity for 68. So if you do get used to them, it does make it a lot easier. I rarely have problems latching onto who I mean to latch onto. I do sense a difference, but it takes time to adjust to it as well. So keep it in mind before you bring it into comp when SR is at stake.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, I could just kind of see that when you guys were discussing it, which is why I wanted to ask. It kind of seemed like something that could be a kind of game changer at times, so I wasn't really sure.
That's what I love about Mercy, is she is so versatile and based on your own play style. But every little thing makes a big difference in survivability with her. The main thing is surviving and keeping your team up. To me, those are my primary objectives. I feel bad if I die too many times. You want to keep alive. Because if you're alive, that means the rest of your team can stay alive. For the most part, unless there's like a barrage or something that happens.
And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The only other thing I wanted to ask is regarding Valkyrie, because there seems to be two camps. One that is use it as often as you can, and others that are more use it on the big push. Do you have an opinion on that?
For me personally, it depends on a couple things. If there's a lot of damage coming to your team and you're getting Valk fast enough and you're able to get it relatively quickly, because Mercy can get it. She, as Evie explained to me or talked about earlier, Mercy gets her ult on a base level. If you have the players all playing at like on a basic level, she gets her ult faster than other healers. So if you're able to get your ult fast, I would say it is good to pop Valk more often when you get it. Yeah, that's how I would say. I would say pop it when you do get it, but the situation has to be, you have to take the consideration into the situation. If you're in the middle of a team fight and you think damage boosting will help you win, if you see one or two of your teammates ulting like a whole hog and you're not able to get to him, definitely use it. Evie?
Sorry, I lost track. What's the question?
It's about whether you should pop Valk or save it for like team pushes.
Like if you're gaining it fairly often.
Yeah, if in a snowball situation, you should generally keep utilizing it until that you, based on game sense, know that the enemy team has an ultimate to push, or multiple ultimates to push back on your push onto them. Then it's better off to save Valkyrie for the next push and then push onto them when they have less ultimates than they did before. So for snowballing, it's very, very good to keep utilizing Valkyrie as soon as you have it to secure additional picks or additional healing, where otherwise they are at the disadvantage. Personally speaking, I assess the situation quickly, figure out what single aspect of Valkyrie will we gain a benefit from, and then just pop it. If you damage boost properly and heal very efficiently, you get Valkyrie very quickly. And so generally the better game sense you have, the more often you can get away with popping it and potentially getting value. But that's not to say that I do waste a lot of Valkyries just off of, we might get value off of this, and just going for it. So, like, personally speaking, especially back in, like, Season 3 and 4, my playstyle was more so back then, but even still now, heavily based off of just risk. Just a whole lot of risk. And being aggressive in my positioning is part of that risk. So, with that being said, it's up to you and your playstyle, but assessing the situation for what value you'll gain off of it, either from healing, you simply surviving, damage boosting to get a pick off, calling out things while keeping the team alive, etc., etc. It's generally best for people to figure out for themselves based off of their team, the enemy team, positioning, and your own playstyle to figure out where you want to utilize Valkyrie.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello.
So because Mercy has so much mobility and she can see a lot of the battlefield, do you find that she's a good target caller, or do you typically delegate that to somebody else?
Depends on the positioning on the map. I love to shot call a lot, but the issue is sometimes depending on the map angling, like if the card's like right here, and if the fight's happening over here, then I'm not going to be able to see anything to really call out. And sometimes I can keep snowballing into the effect where I can't really make efficient callouts for the rest of the map. That's why in the current meta, a lot of pro teams have shifted from their supports or the Lucio from shot calling to their main tanks shot calling, because they're in the front. They see the most for the team, and they're the ones initiating any engagements. So that's not to say that supports are less good than they used to be regarding shot calling, but I would overall say it really depends on the map and how much you can see as a player. Sometimes I like to call out basic things, like, say, at a map a couple weeks ago where we were attacking Hollywood. The Tracer triple blinked into us, tried to get a pick, didn't get off the pick, and recalled. I just said, yo, let's go. They don't have recall. And for a Tracer player, recall is like your lifeline. And so that effectively makes Tracer a much less useful hero for that team, and we won that engagement, just simply calling out the fact that they didn't have a cooldown. I feel like a lot of callouts, if you want to try and do them more often, is simply based off of observation and finding pieces of information that would be beneficial for your team that they would otherwise be able to get the advantage with overall, such as their shield's about to break and their Zarya doesn't have bubbles. That means as soon as shield's broken, their tanks are defenseless, effectively speaking. And so it's very important to call out things that you think that once they are called out will give your team the advantage to push on, or in reverse, reposition, such as their Zarya. You noticed last engagement, they were full charge and lasering down your Winston and Hog. Like, in that situation, you can highly guesstimate that Zarya, if she had previously used grab, is already at 65% of their grab and will have their next grab before your Zarya. And so that could, if you can lose the distance, say, in a payload, that could be the time to then say, hey, let's lose this fight, make them use their grab, and come back with our ult for the next engagement, not using any. It's really just about calling out what you feel is the useful information and getting advantage from that. And so really any role can do that, and depending on what all you can see and observe as Mercy, really is what comes down to whether or not you want to shot call as Mercy.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and another thing I would add too is I got into the habit of when I'm rezzing, you call it out to your team because that way they know maybe let's say they want to push out, it's a 1.75 second time, which seems short now, but it is a long time in the middle of a match. You want to let them know that they're not going to be getting the heals, and also maybe they can if you can't get like protection or something, or maybe there's a flanker that you're having trouble with and you're able to hide but they're still shooting at you, like D.Va can matrix, or they can just help you out with that as well. So another little added call, and all these call outs really help the team, but as a main call out I don't think Mercy, I don't usually main call out with her.
So I have a lot of questions building up in stream. So I'm gonna start addressing a couple of those. However, I'll address more of the bigger ones after stream. So if people want to stick around for that. As far as the things that I think would be most beneficial for things to be answered during this session, such as a simple one being, if you remap to GA, what key would you recommend? Oftentimes, I recommend what I utilize right now, which is my right thumb. If you have a button on your mouse that you don't otherwise utilize, that's a really good button to utilize for Guardian Angel. Because that's usually free and it feels pretty fluid to utilize. I think the shot calling questions are really good. You can be, if you all want, you can be more specific with shot calling questions. I do enjoy them. Hang on, I'm picking out questions.
Enemy seen.
Okay, so when you're healing a target at critical and you know that the beam will detach and they can potentially get killed, would you still use Valk to take the risk for more heals? That's if Valk gives extra heal/damage boost, which is my other question. Valkyrie does not give additional healing or damage boost to an individual target. And yes, oftentimes if I see that person is worth the value and we would be at a disadvantage, or even because of that person dying, I would risk Valkyring to make sure that I can sustain the heals on them. Yeah, absolutely.
Enemy seen.
Let's see here.
Let me get you patched up. Point Seaman.
I'm just gonna restart again.
Mega asks, in the middle of a fight, and one of my teammates dies and is safe to res, but my other teammates need healing. Should I go for the res or focus on who's alive? That really comes down to, is your team at a disadvantage now because of that death? And will them being rezzed give you the advantage either being even or a number up? And how fast your teammates will likely die. If you can get off the res and the teammates will be more critical, sometimes it's worth the trade-off. Like, I've actually had a situation where Volskaya Industries B attack. It was either heal my Reinhardt or go res my Widow in the back. And during a 2 CP stall situation, I actually went back and rezzed my Widow because while the enemy team is trying to stall and to re-secure B, the better option is to have your Widow uncontested in the back, having free shots on the enemy team, rather than having your Reinhardt. Because your Reinhardt can also pin back and get back to the engagement faster than your Widow could in that specific situation anyway. So it's all about trade-offs and whether or not you are willing to make that trade-off and are knowledgeable enough of your current game situation to make that decision.
Enemy seen.
Another thing too I would personally talk about is that when you're healing, like let's say they're critical and you can heal them for a couple of seconds, keep them up so they can back up a little bit in the middle of the fight, and then you can do the res. I've done that before where you are going to lose a couple seconds of the cooldown, but if you're able to keep them up and then pull off the res, that helps too. Especially if the spawn's going to be further away.
Do we have any other questions from in here?
Enemy seen.
Like in
I
the
have
actual
one.
chat?
Go for it.
So with the God, why am I totally not shift? I have it set so that it's not hold to go to your teammate. So you know how like when you have it on the toggle that like if you push it in the middle of it again, you'll stop?
Yep.
Before you get there. So with the shift combined with the space to give you that extra speed, do you ever have the instance where you would push the shift again to stop? Like, is that beneficial, or should I just like not even completely stop after I've pressed space?
You should always find situations, like any part of your kit in any hero, even if it seems like there's no reason to ever do it, you should be good at it to know when to do it. In some of the situations, I've had times where I cancel my Guardian Angel because I don't want to fly into a grab, or I don't want to fly, I can't fully fly across because it would otherwise put me in a pit or something. You know, figuring out when to not do an ability is a good thing to have, and in that specific case, it is good to cancel out the ability and know when to do so.
Enemy seen.
I'm not sure if that answered your question, frankly.
Yeah, I just basically it was like, should you use it or not? And you basically said like, depends on the situation.
Do you feel that there are heroes that you prefer to boost and those that you feel are more, not necessarily worthless, but not as optimal?
I would say there's a lot of different heroes that fall into each category, but the key here is which hero they're going against. Every hero can be good to damage boost. It just depends on what hero they're shooting. Such as Doomfist could be really nice to potentially, if the Zarya is even slightly hurt, the Doomfist could one-shot punch the Zarya if damage boosted. Or the Roadhog could one-shot anybody they hook. Brigitte can more likely do the Tracer combo, but on a 200 HP hero. Ana takes one less shot to kill a target. If she's shooting a Pharah, that's especially if that Pharah is discorded, which is a much more common comp running recently. I often also like to damage boost my Lucio when he's getting up and close with, say, a 200 or 250 HP hero. I see a lot of Lucios 1v1 a Reaper, which is fun to watch, but because he was damage boosted, he's able to secure the kills. You can pretty much think of any matchup and then figure out whether or not damage boosting them is more or not ideal. And that comes with time. But I also like to, in a kind of mean way, judge my teammates from like a 1 to 5 very quickly at the start of a match and figure out whether or not this teammate is more worth it than, say, my other DPS to then pocket more often than not to secure more kills. And while I'll still keep my other DPS alive, knowing who brings me more value overall because of their individual skill at this moment is pretty good to know. Such as, like, say, while my Reinhardt is currently the situation where he would be doing a lot of damage to 2 people, I'd rather damage my half-charge Zarya because their tracking is on point, right? So it really comes down to the hero against what hero, what the status effects are on each of them, and figuring out each individual skill of your teammates and enemies quickly throughout the match. Doesn't need to be a fully accurate guess, but over the course of the match, you get better and better at knowing who's good and who's bad, and then changing up your decision making because of that. And not necessarily bad, but bad relative for that elo. You could have somebody that's, 4,400, a 4,400 match, but relative to the other 4,400s, they're not adequate, right? So they're less value to your team at that very second, for example.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, and that really applies to every single elo. A lot of the times at lower elos, you have that one random teammate that's like, wow, you should not be at this elo, so I'm going to pocket you, by the way. So.
Yeah. And
so it's really match based, sorry.
No, you're okay. I would add also of course you would look at the environment, if it's close quarters, who to damage boost like Reinhardt or whatnot, but also look at like what they're rolling. If they're rolling shields and you have a Widow, normally I like damage boosting a Widow, but if she can't get shots and she can't get through those shields and she hasn't switched yet, it might not be optimal to go for her. Go for something with a little bit more consistent, like a Soldier or even your hog if he's going up in their face. So just get a look for the battlefield and see if you're able to actually get the damage you want out of your boost when you're actually in the middle of it too. But I do like the idea of looking first as well.
Yeah, because I assume, I mean, even if you have, you know, a hog in their face or something, if you have other characters that normally would be who people say, oh, well, you have a soldier, why aren't you boosting them? If they're not actually, you know, putting in their 2 cents, so to speak, you know, they're not taking the shots, they're not as effective for either of you to do so. So that makes sense.
Yeah, there have been times when I've had a Fada, you know how, you'll have the Fada who's like, oh, pharmacy me, right? And you'll keep them up and damage boost them. And if you notice they're not getting, you can see in your crosshairs, if there's no damage going out, sometimes I'll make sure that they're healed and I'll damage boost them once in a while, but they will not be my primary damage boost. If I notice that they can't get through the shields, they can't do the damage, so.
I'll add on to that quickly, where sometimes the FARs are doing damage, but they can't secure the kills. But they're also not receiving damage. That's the perfect time to where that FAR is still giving value to your team simply by existing and the enemy team being distracted. But then you're making that a 2v2 where you're otherwise not bringing enough value as a hero to dedicate your time to another hero that's not bringing value to your team, where otherwise they can still bring value as themselves to then make you being with your team a 5v6 against them while they're constantly being distracted by another player on your team. The same applies to, say, if the soldier's really offside position, he doesn't necessarily need to be damage boosted to still be dealing out free damage to the side of the enemy team. You don't need to be pocketing him. He has his healing pod, as well as you could be otherwise pocketing your team that's pushing into them because your soldier's making the space for your team. It's really about figuring out the situation and who needs prioritization.
Do you guys have any other questions for us here?
Also, if anyone wanted to try out the resurrect falling thing, like, feel free to
Let me know. Oh, me too. Anybody want to try it on my team?
Nice.
Rain Monkey, you want to kill me? Oh, thank you.
There you go. Did your Twitch chat have any other questions?
There's a lot of them. I was going to deal with them.
Der Kampf ist noch nicht vorbei.
Do we have somebody watching the DB stream with the questions from that one?
Yeah, I believe there are a couple girls in there, but I don't think there's been anything asked. Or no one's relayed that to me.
Helden sterben nicht.
Okay, well, I think that's all I have to add for the class, if there's no questions. Evie, you want to show them the little fun way of getting across the other side?
Oh, yeah, sure. Coming back right now. I'll be able to vouch for in about 5 seconds. Or just like, you know. Alright, come over here. So a little fun thing that you might have seen on Reddit, but has been in the game since I know of. You can jump up onto this tree, but more importantly, there's a platform right here, and then you jump up to a higher spot, and then that guarantees you a safe passage over here.
What? Mind blown.
Oh,
Heroes never die.
No! Wait,
Heroes
see
never
that?
die.
Oh no.
Heroes never die.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Evie, or are you just gonna kind of wrap it up off stream?
As far as this session, I'm pretty sure I had covered everything I wanted to cover. Right now, there's just questions for stream that I was gonna deal with. If people would like to watch, absolutely. But again, I'll post the VOD for people who would like to watch later.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, that should wrap up our Mercy DBU. Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Evie and Sub, for hosting that. That was great.
Thank you all.
you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Knowledge.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah,
You
nice
too,
job.
bye-bye.
Good night. Take care.
Hello there.